The reality is that you will grieve forever. You will not get over the loss of a loved one. You will learn to live with it. You will heal and you will rebuild yourself around the loss you've suffered. You will be whole again, but you will never be the same. Nor should you be the same, nor would you want to. Some of the best advice that I've ever received about grief was along these lines. The grief that you feel will never leave you. Some days you'll feel it more and others less, but it'll always be there. The hole that's left from the passing of a loved one will never fully disappear. And the key is to realize that this is not from love that you've lost, but from love that you have and will always have for this person. My grandma Zamora was the youngest sibling in a big family, and as a result, she learned how to be heard. She told me about how crazy her family always thought she was because she was willing to move anywhere and everywhere to pursue her career. She told me about the time where, as a school receptionist, she was asked to deal with a class that had just caused their current teacher to leave the building crying. She walked into the classroom, stood in front of all of the kids with pencils, chalk, erasers flying in the air, and she told them, "I don't know what you're supposed to be doing, but you need to sit down, pull something out, and do it." The class was quiet for the rest of the day. My grandma knew how to get her point across, and she wasn't worried about hurting feelings, except for when it came to her grandchildren. Grandma Z's grandchildren were her pride and joy. She would do everything she could to make us happy, and as the oldest of 7 grandchildren, I was lucky enough to be able to experience this firsthand. All of the sleepovers that we had as children are some of my fondest childhood memories. Endless fruit snacks, Domino's pizza, homemade Mexican food, Golden Graham cereal, and Balderdash were some of our staples, and those still remind me of those sleepovers to this day. She and my grandpa did everything they could to make sure that every moment we spent with them was as fun as possible, and they sure did a great job at that. Those memories will forever bring a smile to my face. Growing up into a young adult, my visits became fewer and further between as my responsibilities grew, and this is one of my least favorite things about adulthood. Grandma would still check in on me all the time through texts and calls just to make sure I was doing okay and that I was making ends meet. And no matter what I told her, she and Grandpa would send me a little bit of money in the mail just to make sure. She was this way with all of her grandchildren, and if it were up to her, nothing bad would ever happen to any of us. Her favorite story of me was when I was learning to count, and she asked me how much I loved her, and I told her that I can't count that high. I don't think anybody would be able to count high enough to measure how much she loved us. When I heard that Grandma was in critical condition, I was crushed, and the restrictions that this pandemic placed on us made this even harder. I was able to get a couple video calls with her. I was able to drive to her house and say hi to her through her window, but I never really knew what to say. I made sure that she knew that I loved her, but there are never words to describe the feeling of knowing that somebody you love is gonna pass. I left these conversations with her feeling empty and kicking myself for not being able to find the words, and so much that one day I finally, against my better judgment, I decided to get in the car, drive over to her house, and walk through the front door and just try to talk to her in person. It was Mother's Day, so it only felt right to buy her some flowers and a card. This was breaking all kinds of rules, and I was fully expecting to be kicked out, but I just wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't just try one more time to talk with her. Luckily, I was allowed to stay, and I was lucky enough to be able to tell my grandma how much I loved her. I was able to tell her how much those childhood memories mean to me, and how her endless love and care for me has completely changed my life. Grandma was selfless the way that she cared for her grandchildren. Her happiness came from our happiness, and the way she cared for us will never, ever be replaced. And I'm okay with that. So, Grandma, if you're seeing this somehow, I love you very, very much. And I would tell you how much I love you, but I can't count that high. And I cannot wait to see you again. I love you, Grandma.